here how to repair tailgate, at least the way that I like to do it. This happens to be from a Dodge Ram, but the process here would apply to virtually any tailgate, or even actually to door panels as well. So first thing I did, I saw some bubbling of the paint here. Didn't actually know the extent of the damage, because potentially I could have just gotten the paint down, seen solid metal, and then just proceeded with coating instead of actual cutting and repair. But I used a wire wheel. That's kind of an aggressive wire wheel with the twisted wires there, but any wire wheel would work. If you're going to use the one like that, you got to be a little bit more careful. You don't remove metal in areas you don't want to. But anyways, once I got into there, I found there was pretty significant pitting here and at least one hole there. And then the back side of that panel actually looked pretty bad too. But the rest of the tailgate is in really pretty great shape. So the first thing I did is I laid some tape down just to protect the area that's a little bit better. That way when I go to actually paint this, I'll probably just paint below this mark. I mean, ideally you'd prep the whole panel, clear coated and everything, make it look all uniform. But this part of the tailgate actually doesn't show too much. I just don't like to leave rust, so I wanted this to be nice and solid. So next what I did, I wanted to make a straight line. Now, I mean, you can make a diagonal line and replace that, and that's fine. But I just find your cuts are going to be easier if they're straight. Welds are going to be easier to make, so I like to use a straight edge. So I just used the same width of the ruler, marked it with a marker, and then used a cutoff wheel. So this is just a 4.5-inch grinder with a cutoff wheel. You can see that's not a grinder wheel. It's very thin, as opposed to there's a grinder wheel. So that's much thinner, and you can get a really straight cut. You can see that is a very nice cut. I had to clean it up just a tiny little bit with an angle grinder like this, but you know, you could use just a block with some sandpaper on it, would be fine too. So anyways, once I got this part cut here, I flipped the tailgate over, and you can see it's a little rustier on that side. But anyways, there's no room to get an angle grinder in between here and here. So then what I used is just a little sawzall like that. You could use a body saw too. You could even use just a regular hacksaw blade. There's a number of different ways to do that, but that worked really well. So then I was able to remove this piece here and then make a suitable replacement part. You can see there is a little bit of rust underneath here. Ideally I'd cut that on and replace it too, but I'm actually never going to use this truck in the winter again. So that part not showing, and this piece being actually pretty thick, I'm just going to leave that. So next step was to see what thickness metal was, so I could find a replacement. You can use it. You can just match up the metal, but you know, if you have one of these roughly $10 metal gauges, it's pretty easy to determine. So I just cleaned up a part. See, there's no kind of rough edges on the side there, so I could get a pretty accurate one. And I estimated this was somewhere between 20 and 18, but it's a little thicker, so it actually turns out it's 18. So I found another piece of new 18 gauge metal here. I marked that. I actually cut it on a shear like this, but you don't necessarily need anything quite that fancy. Bench mounted shear like that also works really good. The only downside is you do get a little bit of warpage of the metal after you use that, but that's fine because you can just pound it flat. You can even use just a hand shear as well. Like, you want to use if you're going to cut 18 gauge, you want to use a pretty high quality shear, but that one there, which maybe was $30, will cut 18 gauge without much problem. You'll get a little bit better workout in your hand. But anyways, if you have a nice shear, that'll really make a nice straight cut. And then subsequently I used a brake to make a nice straight bend in it. Now this doesn't bend 180 degrees like this would call for, but I just bent it all the way up, which gets to about 130 degrees, and then I just pounded it the rest of the way on with the anvil and a hammer. Now, if I didn't have the brake, it would be totally fine, because you can use a nice bench vise like this, which honestly is almost a must if you're doing metal work like this. I'd draw my straight line, put it in there. You can pound this over, get a nice 90-degree angle there. And then the next step is you could take it over to, the anvil or a bigger anvil and just pound it the rest of the way down. Now, you don't want that to be completely closed in, because then you won't be able to fit it onto the old tailgate. So I just put another piece of 18 gauge in between there and then pounded it down. So that way it ensures that I at least have the thickness of 18 gauge, which is on the original equipment panel. So now what I'm left with is a decent looking piece. You can see there's pounded it down there, but it's pretty straight, nice and cleaned up. And then take it over and fit it up. And that fits pretty well. You can see that the curvature of that actually matches up pretty well. And that's because I used the same thickness metal. And like I said, when I pounded it the rest of the way, I used the piece of 18 gauge in between there to get that curvature. And then that'll go on there pretty well. Just kind of weld it in there with interspersed spot welds, allowing it time to cool, even using some compressed air to cool that off. This is 18 gauge, so it's a little bit thicker, but this is also a flat piece here without any ridge that provides a lot of stability in the metal, so you can warp this without much if you're not really pretty careful. So be cautious with heat control. Just do one, let it cool off, or do one, blow it off with some compressed air, do another one, compressed air, and then just continue that way. You just want to really be cautious with heat. Taking a little extra time to do your welding now will save you a lot of extra time later with preparation and to make it look flat and not warped. The other thing too is you don't want to just leave that bare metal on the inside. So you can use like a weld through primer, which can coat this inner surface once you grind that protectant layer off the metal. So when you get metal from the store, it's got a little bit of a coating on it, usually almost like not exactly sure what the coating is, but paint won't stick to it real well. So you got to get it cleaned off. You get a good wire wheel, and then a nice pre-painting prep or lacquer thinner or something similar to that to clean it off real nicely. And actually this is a really good opportunity to get inside the panel with a rust encapsulator or some kind of body cavity rust control, because now we have access. There are other ways to get in there. See, there's that little hole there to get into, but anyways, take the opportunity when you're cutting holes in your vehicle to look around and see what else is inside of there. Okay, and this piece is really not providing much structure, so I might actually just cut that off, kind of smooth it out. I don't waste too much time doing that stuff because nobody will ever see that ever again, but at the same time it's good to be thorough. All right.